family was having a vacation time, he was sitting and reading this book. That was a very interesting thought for me, as in somebody sitting, and because he is passionate about reading books. So we have been seeing through that, in the last few months, where we have been reading some of Dr. Deepu George's reviews and observations of many books, that we have gone through. So I think we will directly jump on to listen to what Dr. Deepu George talks about this book. Arundhati Roy's Mother Mary Comes to Me has been talk of the town in the last few days. So we have Dr. Deepu George. He's a voracious reader. Many people have different observations about the book. Some people think that it's her mother's story. Some people think this has made her a rebel. This has made her courageous. But I have also listened to something like this should be read neutrally. That how this is going to impact you as a person, as an individual, as a man, as a woman. So we'll listen to what Dr. Deepu George says. He is HOD of General Medicine Medical Trust Hospital. That's also interesting side, because he doesn't do a individual personal practice because he wants to spend his time reading. So that's another way he's a role model. So welcome, Dr. Deepu George.
Thank you, Ashish. In fact, when this book was in pre-publication phase, it was amongst the books that I looked forward to the most. And specifically for the reason that way back in 1997, when Arundhati won the Booker Prize for The God of Small Things, it actually changed the way we look at Indian English writing itself. And to be very frank, though, in 97 when it came out, and people including me were actually not following Indian English writers keenly or very closely. My mom, who's an English teacher, actually read it and insisted that I read it and go through a central Travancore Syrian family's life on the banks of Meenachilar, where most of my own relatives still live. So there is a part of this book in which she also tells about how she got into the literature world, which I think was absolutely by chance. In fact, most of us who follow Arundhati on her non-fictional writings, because now My Seditious Heart probably sets the tone for who that person is and who that author is. And I think they are very, very parallel. It is not a different existence at all. A lot of people find it very difficult to accept her non-fictional works and say that she has a seditious heart. She's an anti-national. And I think the single word to describe Arundhati is non-conformist. If you actually expect her to conform with what you think is right or what you think your moral compass tells you is perfect, she's not going to oblige. And that, I think, is a thread of the way that you should look at this grief memoir, if you can call it, or a memoir, if you can call it. And as Ashish knows, I have a special soft corner for anything which is remotely biographical or autobiographical. So it is quite natural that I actually decided to spend time with the book during a vacation. And to be frank, I don't think my reading affects my family at all, because I get up pretty early before anybody else is awake. I make my own tea and sit down with my books. And that is when I finish the maximum number of pages, although I might get hooked in between and get pulled into a book right in between a conversation or a family post-dinner talk or post-lunch talk also. But the fact remains that these are two people that I think every Malayali or somebody of our age should read, should understand, and it gives a glimpse into the times of their lives also. So recently, I saw on FB a post of the tomb of Mary Roy, Arundhati's mother, and there were only three words on it, and that was a dreamer, an achiever, and a teacher. I think, see, those sum up the lady. There's no mention about her husband. There's no mention about both her kids. And I think that is how she was. So if actually, I've spoken to a lot of people who have personally interacted with Mary Roy, not essentially after the book, but we knew as people from Central Travancore. Myself, my parents are basically from Central Travancore, so I know Pallikudam and I know Corpus Christi when it was started, and I know how she started the school. And to be very frank, you had to be a little mad as a woman to survive in the chauvinist capital of India, that is Kottayam. And I don't mean to demean anyone because I belong there. So don't think that I'm pointing fingers at anyone. But she actually had a very, very, very radical and far ahead of times method of education, which was imparted to a very welcoming set of people. And I think Arundhati herself writes that I preferred to be a student of hers than a daughter of hers. So that sums up that there is a dichotomy in the personality itself. She was an absolute dreamer, absolute warrior, and absolutely perfect teacher. Because people whom I know who have studied there, who still talk about the ways in which she's inculcated values, morals, attitude to life, and how you approach even literature. So I think when we start off discussing this book, I think the initial three chapters, which were out in the Vogue magazine much before the publication itself, and they gave a sneak preview on how Arundhati comes to Ooty with her single mother, with her brother Lalit Kumar, Christopher Roy, LKC Roy to be short. And they land up in Ooty and they barge into the ancestral house of Mary Roy's father, who was a British entomologist. And they have a small little property there. Half of it is on rent and half of it, which is probably is like an outhouse, they barge into it and they stay there because they have nowhere else to go. In those days, imagine this lady is a single mother to his two very young children, and between Lalit Kumar Roy and Arundhati, the difference in age is hardly 9 months. I think she got pregnant unplanned with Arundhati. She tried her level best to abort Arundhati. In fact, every single method that she could in those days, including raw papaya and all those things, she's written it in graphic detail. So that itself is a disturbing premise to start with. And to make matters worse, Mary Roy ma'am had severe symptomatic asthma. I myself am an asthmatic, my mom is asthmatic, so I know how bad these attacks can be. And a heavy component of asthmatic spells are also triggered by emotional stress. So, as a physician, I can tell you that she was not feigning it. She genuinely had asthmatic attacks on worsening emotional roller coaster rides, which are part and parcel of a single mother trying to raise two small children. So she actually had a tough time raising these two kids, but that doesn't mean that there is any justification for the way she treated these two children. LKC Roy especially had a very tough time with physical abuse, mental trauma, taunting, the F word, the B words, all coming out all the profanities coming out unfiltered from the mother's mouth. And imagine these kids who have just her to fall back on. There are maid servants like Kurishu Ammal and people who take care of them, who give them a bath, who cook for them, and things like that in Ooty at that time. But a mother is a mother, so it actually turns the concept of motherhood. We are, as a nation, we call, what do you call our own nation? We call it Mother India, right? So the concept of motherhood itself is questioned. In fact, most of our religions, whether it's Mother Mary or it is Ma Kali. Every religion has a mother deity there. So this book is going to turn your concepts of motherhood right on its head, and you have to be absolutely be open about a non-judgmental approach to this, because this is somebody's life. You can't pass a judgment on why this lady did it or why whether she should have been right or wrong, because and this is not fiction, this is facts. And I'm sure she's filtered down a lot of it for the sake of the fact that she gives this book as a tribute to her mother, who eventually, knowingly or unknowingly, played the major role in pushing her to be the author that we know her and love her to be. Then obviously the beauty of Arundhati's books is her prose. You as in I can show you parts of the book where I've just gone on underlining, and there's one underlining at least in every single page. And that's beautiful the way she puts her English across, grammatical constructions, her similes, and the way she constructs things and random words and formations which tell you the depth, the reach, and the soul of a message that she is to convey in very simple words. Though the book is probably a little voluminous to look at, the print is be beautifully spaced out by Penguin and it's a very easy read. and she's divided it into multiple chapters. And from the chapters which talk about how Mary Roy is forced to get out of Uti's house by her brother, G. Isaac, who is, as I had mentioned in my blurb earlier with you, is a very, very interesting character in itself. In fact, if you were to ask me to choose one character other than the mother and the daughter, G. Isaac is a specimen. You know, he's the Chaco of God of Small Things, and he is very proud to say that also. But remember how he enters the story. He enters the story of her life as the person, or the Amachan that we call in Malayalam. Kottayam is called the Mamachan's Amma's brother, comes with her grandmother to evict them from Ooty, because she's said yes to the first proposal that she had from Michael Roy, Mickey Roy, because of his Mickey years, who was a tea estate manager in Assam, and who was an absolute drunkard, vagabond, sociopath because he was good for nothing. He was only drinking himself to happiness, and who made a lot of these peripheral people his friends, but absolutely useless to the family. In fact, I think one description of what her father was in the book, that his a- most irritating habit to Mrs. Roy was his ability to just blankly stare into oblivion. And Mary Roy's description of that man was he was not even capable of thinking. Okay, so Arundhati, who obviously has 50% of the genes from her father, tries to tell her that how can you say that he is not thinking? He must have been thinking of something, right? So Mary Roy says, no, for that you need basic brains, you know. So that is how dismissive she was about her husband. And this man was absolutely good for nothing. In fact, the only thing which he used to do was keep moving his feet, and blow bubbles from the mouth. You know, these are things that kids do. These are things that you do when you're absolutely jobless. And here's a description of a man who's a father who has been doing this all his life. So he's not contributed anything. In fact, zero contribution to child rearing, the family finances, the responsibilities, nothing. LKZ Roy, her brother, from in the deep, dark alleys of Calcutta. For a moment, for a few years, I think he was living with the Sisters of Charity, with Mother Teresa's charity. So when she actually gets on a train to Delhi to learn architecture, I think it was more an attempt to get out of this ghetto, get out of this jail, get out of this traumatizing lady who happened to be her mother. That's all that you can say. Because though she was in the hostel for a few years and she was very good with her studies, she was openly appreciated by her mother for the academics part. But there are extremely scary bits which, you know, if it were a movie, there are times when you read a book and you actually visualize these. The scariest visual was about she visiting her mom's school, Pallikudam's architect Laurie Baker in Trivandrum, and on their way back in a something like probably a Matador van or so, with her parivar of maids who were fanning her, who were carrying her inhalers, medicines, and all these. Laurie Baker is somebody who comes across as a very friendly person to Mary Roy, and she discusses the Motakunnu, which eventually became the present Pallikudam, at depth. And Laurie Baker gives the sketches, and sends an apprentice of his to the site, who eventually turns out to be the first love interest of Arundhati. And she was not able to strike up a good conversation with either of them, either Laurie Baker or JC, whom she calls Jesus Christ, because he had long manes like our Ashish. And Mary Roy absolutely puts her down. In fact, blasts her for being stupid. And how she's ostracized is by being thrown out of the van in the middle of the road back home. So this is alien to her. This is dark, and she's a young girl, and she's left in the middle of the road, in the middle of nowhere. Very soon you realize that Mickey Roy also tells a similar story about her. So this is, you know, double parenting mistakes. So imagine this girl has not had a whiff of love, care, affection, and protection, which is expected for a child of that age. And she grows up to be an absolute rebel that we all admire, we admonish, we look up to, we criticize, whatever be it. So let's save the judgments. So she gets on a train to Delhi, I think more with the very obvious decision that she's not going to come back home. She's made up her mind, but she's carrying a knife because that's her only protection in that bag. And she sets foot in Nizamuddin. I was reminded of Mukundatan's Delhi Gadagal, where Sahadevan comes to Delhi, the same dark, dirty, soot-filled, smoke-filled Delhi with Yamuna washing off all its dirt. And it's the same dirtiest, darkest, dingiest alleys that Arundhati, who's the daughter of the privileged Mary Roy, goes to live. She goes to the hostel of the architecture school. There's nothing great to describe. And I think she narrowly misses a literature course also in between somewhere. But she enjoys the architecture school more for its freedom, more for what she gets to do, everything in every single way. She's smoking, she's sleeping with multiple guys and things like that. There's absolute openness in all these things, and it is something that you accept the author for who she is. So she makes a lot of friends. Most of them are obviously boys and people who have lived through these years. People like Sanjay, people like her classmates from the architecture school who have lived on till today to be her friends. And most of these people are there even during the book launch, that you can see them in person, because these are people that you have only read through the book. Now, slowly but surely, she gets to realize that the person whom she saw as Laurie Baker's assistant in Pallikudam premises in the initial stages of the school happens to be a senior at the same school. And she obviously falls in love with him and they decide to settle down. But they do not get a court official marriage because there's a long queue. You know, in that restlessness to get married for the sake of getting married, they decide to ditch it. And that chapter is described as Jesus Christ marries a Japanese parcel, because she was looking like a Japanese parcel with a kimono-like dress, and he was so good looking and things like that. And they go and settle in Goa and try and live like the hippies of those days. But there is a problem because he has a doting mother who adores her only son. And these are absolute dark areas that Arundhati is scared to commit. These are absolute dark areas where she has a problem with seriously good, typical Indian families. So because she hasn't had that, she hasn't had that. So she says it's good to emulate, it's good to look up to, it's nice to be there, but always she remembers that she doesn't belong there because she hasn't had such an image about a family as such. The book moves forward into the life of a small-time filmmaker called Pradeep, whose wife happened to be her boss earlier. And when they go there, he's somebody who's got two daughters living upstairs to his parents. And again, the family mold is set there. And this man falls in love with her, and they decide to live together. The lady walks out, so she's automatically being shown as a bitch who's breaking a family of well settled Pradeep and his daughter. But again, though she has a wonderful rapport with the daughter, she is scared to be the mother figure there. So again, you go back to the role of Mary Roy in her life all through. They start making some movies, and she is seriously into scripting for movies, and it is getting international acclaim and things like that. But again, as we just spoke earlier, there's a lot of movies which are very good, but which essentially do not get serious financial benefits other than critical acclaim, and which is not going to get you the daily bread. And she realizes this is not going to be enough in the long run. Pradeep, in the meantime, is somebody who's got absolute genius range of knowledge about woods, trees, and flowering plants, and he writes books about them, and which eventually becomes a benchmark of that particular area. And they decide to not proceed with that relationship years later, though she still considers him as her best friend, mentor, guide, somebody who pushed her to start writing serious fiction. And even today, I was going through a review, and she says, if I had to jump into the river of literature, it had to be about my miniature. It was how possessive she felt about the river. She talks about even now when she visits the village of Imenam, she looks the other side when it comes to that old house because the house is not there anymore. because after Mary Roy wins the Travancore inheritance will judgment with Indira Jay Singh at the Supreme Court, it was sold. And between the pages, they tell that the spoils were shared with even G. Isaac. And they both disposed of the entire money that they got on various things. She obviously must have used it for furthering the school premises and things like that. And G. Isaac had a Malabar Coast food products factory, which was also shut down by Mary Roy. So Mary Roy had a score to settle there for the G. Isaac and her own mother, bringing her out of the Ooty house, and where she had to run in the middle of the night with these two kids to the SHO and get a stay. And I remember the lines there where the Tamil Nadu SHO says that this inheritance doesn't affect your stay in Tamil Nadu. So Ooty actually was a saving grace. Otherwise, they would have been in the middle of the road to nowhere. So the story evolves like that, but slowly, as she gets her mom back to Delhi to see her, the first thing this lady who's short, plump, who's on steroids by then, probably has got a very bad asthmatic lung by then, is still carrying a very heavy typewriter to her daughter. Because by then she's realized that though they've been thousands of miles apart, and poles apart with their communication, because there is a part in which Arundhati says that she was fed up of reading her mother's letters because she was constantly taunting her, even through letters, that Sanjay or Pradeep were assigned the role of reading it and telling her if there was anything to take home other than the abuses. And the bitch word kept coming every now and then. And her mother refused to accept that she could have an identity outside typical Syrian family based future as such. So when the typewriter comes, that is an endorsement of the fact that she was expected to be a writer, and there was a lot of confidence in her mother who actually made her write the first few lines. And there is that three lines that she's written as a child, the first three lines, and it was about some teacher of hers taking a class, and she was asked to write an open three lines, and it was actually very funny, and I forgot how it was quoted, but I think it was very funny, the three lines that she wrote. And in fact, she gets whacked for writing something openly, but Mary Roy never, ever made her change her lines. Mary Roy never, ever made her apologize for her stance. So when she won actually the Booker Prize, there's also a lot of information there about the world of publishing, about how Godwin actually pushes for international publication across 40 languages, translations, and things like that, and how it became an international hit, and the need for a good publisher to push you to the higher echelons of a good price. The price itself was voluminous and uh, uh, a huge sum for somebody who was absolutely on a rental apartment. She bought a house of her own very, very late. In fact, I think hardly a decade back or so, in a decent locality. Till then, she was on a rented apartment. In fact, when Mary Roy got her a typewriter and a fridge, uh, Arundhati didn't know what was the use of a fridge in a house. Can you imagine? And she actually used it as a cupboard for keeping her books. So that is the role of books in the life of an author whom I admire as a reader myself, and I can perfectly get that vibe. So this is how the book evolves as a writer. Then she talks about the utmost happiness characters who actually travel most of these distances with her, because by that time she has decided that she will have these small visits back to Pallikudam, where Mary Roy is anyway settled on the campus as the principal. And we get the second aspect of Mary Roy as the school principal, who picks up a fight with the famous Kottayam collector of that time. And there's serious amounts of um, fighting with her mom, even now in these pages, where she says that you should ideally be given a copy of the book, the Italian book, which talks about a Jewish family who settles with the Nazis in the hope that the persecution won't happen to them, and they eventually are maimed. And that book is what she wants to gift the ex Kottayam collector who's with the right wing right now. So this lady is not dying down. So this is actually, she's taking up the cudgels for a fight even now, and she's fully fit and ready to fight more. After that, her mother's final days as a doctor was something which appealed to me because it talks about her on the ventilator. And when Arundhati comes in, Our Lady is literally shouting at her through the tube and blaming her without realizing that there was a will in which Mary Roy had told that she should not be ventilated. And it is Arundhati's job to make sure that she was not ventilated. But as a doctor, I like the fact that Arundhati looked at it very positively and said that if not for that ventilation, if not for that intubated, ventilated state, Mary Rai would have left us at least 15 years back. So it's a life-saving machine. So, in the days when social media and even the print media and the TV media is taking cudgels against any doctor who actually intubates an elderly. Remember that it's a life-saving machine, and I'm glad that my favorite author has stood up for the fact that the ventilator gave her 15 extra years with her mother. The relationship between the mother and the daughter slowly evolves into something which is more mature, but at the same time she still doesn't give anything more than 2 3 days at a time, because she knows that after that this lady will again take off. But now it's at a different plane. Now it's at a different plane because when she comes to stay with her mom, when she comes to be the bystander to her mother in the hospital, Mary Roy actually thinks that they are all taking care of her because she is Arundhati's mother now, and which she does not take very lightly, because she believes that she has a right of her own to be a superstar. The superstar who actually staged Jesus Christ Superstar with a court stay against the same collector who tried to stall it, saying that it is going to fan religious sentiments, actually got it framed and put it right behind her chair as a principal to show the fighting spirit of this lady. So when she died, they decided to make a small little park, the stone with says the dreamer, the achiever, and the teacher. And it was a visionary also, because whatever said and done, as I always quote Pope Francis, who are we to judge? We are not here to judge anyone. Mary Roy's role was very profound in shaping the character, shaping the morals, shaping the values, shaping the fighting spirit of the Arundhati Roy that we all are so proud of. We are all so um judgmental in either poles, because My Seditious Heart is also given adequate pages in this book, because she talks about Narmada Bachao Andolan, the Naxalbaris of Bastar, her travels with them, and how she's had to have a bath with a lady in the open pond, and how that lady's hair is shown being pulled out in the corpse that is being displayed as the Naxal being shot dead. So it's very personal, and it's not like she's taken a stand or a side by just reading something or just being manipulated by somebody. She's been there. She's been there with them. About the Kashmir, this thing, the Azadi, which is again big news. She shared the jail stay that she has had in the jail with the same woman who was pregnant, who was indicted in the parliament attacks. So she's known this issue up personal and in depth. So you can't blame her for taking a side. We might not agree with what she's saying. We might not like what she's saying, but she has a reason to do it. And I think that is where the judgment on this book and this author should end. And recently, I think at the launch of the book at St. Teresa's, Sudhiratan also had very openly wrote that she actually spoke for the kids who were dying in Gaza also. So you cannot take the politics out of Arundhati. You can take Arundhati out of Indian politics however you like, but you cannot take the politics out of Arundhati. That's the way she is. And it was the same wish or the same response from Mary Roy when she won the Booker Prize and when she was asked to go to the jail. Go, baby, go. So that was how a mom who's a pillar of strength has been monumental in shaping the destiny of Arundhati Roy. In fact, I think the way she sums up at the back of this book, in these pages, my mother, my gangster shall live. She was my shelter and my storm. That just sums up everything so beautifully. And I like the fact that this is designed with a lot of care, because it's angry red, and there is a BD with blazing red ember right there. In fact, yeah, I saw a lot of criticism about people trying to say that people might take up to smoking by seeing this. My honest advice to them is, if somebody is stupid enough to look at this and take up cigarettes, I think they don't deserve to read a book of this maturity as such. And the aging gracefully, Arundhati is there right at the back. So it's a beautifully designed book and cover, lot of quotable quotes, a lot of it will stay with you for a long time. And to be very honest, I won't be surprised if it walks away with a lot of awards if the jury is genuine. I'm not talking about the Indian juries now, but at least internationally, it's set to be garnering a lot of praise, a lot of awards and accolades. Because now, in my blurb also, I think we are noted about grief memoirs becoming very popular across the world. So Annie Ernaux won the Nobel for grief memoirs, about uh, writing down memoirs which are absolutely disturbing for anybody to go through. So to be very frank, this is not a very easy read. It's a very disturbing book to read if you're actually quite sentimental or protective about your own children, because this is a very abusive parent that we are talking about, and she might have been behind jail if she was alive, and this comes out. A lot of, as you said, there's a lot of criticism about why she should wash the dirty laundry now. But don't think that at the end of this book you will end up hating Mary Roy. You will probably just understand Mary Roy more, and through that you will understand Arundhati more. Arundhati more. That is what I think the book is about. So it's basically for a person. It's not hero worshipping. It's not hagiographic. She is absolutely like one of your Suresh Gopi dialogues of Commissioner. She's absolutely stripped herself threadbare. There's nothing else. There's nothing left in her after this. And there is a definite closure in this book for her. It's a troubled relationship that she had to get over. As a writer, how else can you get over a troubled relationship? You can just pen it down, right? So recently, I think there was a Swedish person who wrote, I forgot the quotation, author, who said that a family dies when an author becomes a hit. But I don't think a family is dying here. That family was dead the moment she walked out of Mickey Roy's life and came alone to raise these two kids. And the family is still alive, as we can see in the book launch. They all were there at Kochi, which I narrowly missed attending. But the fact remains that it is not for a moral compass of a typical Malayali to judge Arundhati Roy. Probably that's why she still doesn't want to live here and write. I think we are too judgmental to accommodate that sort of a rebel in our midst. We will probably uh, place her on a pedestal and adore her as a Ma Kali or something like that. But that is how you should probably look at the book.
So somewhere I was getting some glimpses of Pooja Bedi writing about Pratima Bedi in time pass.
To be very frank, I'll tell you one example of hers which was very famous or infamous even in those days when Pallikudam had just started. It was a co-ed school, and even our own schools when we were growing up were not co-ed. Most of the schools. Now it's very rare to find a unigender school itself. So when this happened, this incident, I had read about it in the papers itself, and that is again mentioned in the book. It's about grown-up boys taunting girls about underwears, undergarments, and they were taunting the classmates about braziers. Mary Roy, in the open assembly, picked out the guy who did this and asked him to go to her own wardrobe and get a brazier. Okay. And she actually flaunted it right in front of the assembly and said, "This is what your sister, this is what your mother has also been wearing. And if you're going to make fun of your own classmates for wearing this, there's something wrong with you." So imagine the impact of that in the minds of the children who grow up to see that as not something which is a perverted thing to be oogling at, So that's the kind of lady that she was. So as you said, if Protima Bedi was in Mumbai, this lady is right in the middle of Kotte, which I actually call the Achayan Kota, because I know how frigid people are with these kind of beliefs, and how they would love to go and sneak at girls in Bangalore, but when it comes to their own hometown, they'll pass a judgment about any girl who shows a little bit of skin in their own hometown. So this is not for the faint-hearted, and this lady is definitely not going to fit into your stereotypes at all. And if you're being very judgmental, I would say don't bother reading, because this is not your material to read at all. So, and that is why I'm actually quite heartened to hear that actually from Kalur Madhurabhumi, the word that I got from 48 hours of the book launch was 300 copies sold. 300, and that's not a small number for an English book. In fact, I think if Priya or somebody is listening to it, I think it's going to be a very, very tough ask to translate this into Malayalam, because the words are actually flown from the depth of her heart, and it's very difficult to find equivalent Malayalam words and usages for that. In fact, I would be actually be surprised if they get the flow right with the translation. Should it be translated at all? That's a different question. But the beauty of that prose has to be, you have to read it to understand how beautiful it is. It is tempting for a lot of people who I didn't expect to be great readers. In fact, my reading friends have all got one copy each, much before I wrote the blog, because it's a sensation right now. Even DC is selling it with a lot of discounts and paraphernalia attached to that. There's a tote bag. There's mine is a autographed copy, which I can definitely show off, because I waited for the personal autographed copy of this. In fact, this is something to be treasured. So if you can see that, I don't know if it's clear. So there is multiple add-ons to this, has special offers now. But the person I wanted to tell you was my dad. He's not an avid reader, but he actually asked for the book the moment I kept it aside. And regarding the first comment that you made, that I read during the vacations, I actually missed the launch for my family. So I balanced it out. In fact, I was supposed to be there at St. Teresa's Mother Mary Hall. And that also was an incidental by chance. A lot of people whom I knew had attended and asked me why I'm not there. So that's okay. As in, you have to balance your family and your books also at the same time. They are also my family. And the fact remains that this is book which is tempting a lot of people. So my dad is not somebody who reads this a lot of books at length, but he also wants to know what has made her what she is. So now there is a fight between my daughter and my father. My daughter has promised him that she will finish soon. In fact, for the meeting, for the Zoom, I have taken it down at 6 o'clock, and I told her I want it for Ashish uncle for an hour, and then I'll give her back. It's very tempting. It is actually quite riveting to sit and read it at a stretch. But I would forewarn you that it's a book that you shouldn't rush through. But for example, I'm reading the Man on Investigations by Saharu. So Saharu is somebody whom I follow. Why I put it alongside is there are very few Indian authors that I personally follow and who I wait for a book to be launched. Saharu is one. Then I follow Upamanyu Chatterjee. There was a time when I used to read all the Chetan Bhagats back to back till the last few at least. So, why I told you is Saharu is compelling, as in this is a very compelling narrative, and I can actually sit and finish it tonight itself. But Mother Mary comes to me, I think you should just go slow, because each chapter has a lot of emotions packed into it, and it's life. So don't dilute it by trying to finish it at one stretch. I got a lot of quality time with the book over the Onam holiday, so that's why I probably could finish it first.
Talking about the emotions, now Sudhirji had written about her, it's not a confession, like how she felt when she had to read that book for the audio version.
Mm.
Probably you might have noticed that.
Yes.
So could you comment about
See, when you actually put yourself in her position itself, it is very difficult to read. So if you actually see, usually I read for most of the reviews online, I read a portion from that. If you ask me to read it, I would be gagged for emotions, because it's difficult. It is very difficult, because even if you put yourself in that same situation and try and read the portion, it is difficult. So imagine how difficult it is for her itself to read that. Because see, at a time, she is blaming her mother for being what you can call from quote unquote from Mary Roy's words itself, you can call her as a queen bitch. But the fact remains that It's a mother. It's the only stone of relationship from the blood that she had, because it is to be uh, compared to the relationship that she has with her father, even after he's been found. There is absolutely no emotional bonding that is running through, although she tries her level best to reach out to him through gifts, through money, trying to rehabilitate him, getting him Bradman paraphernalia because he was a avid cricket fan and things like that. But there's no emotional bonding, you know. So, whatever said and done, it is so difficult to pen this. And I can't even imagine how she actually goes through reading these portions, because it's a life. You're not reading fiction anymore. You're not reading about Rahel or Chaco or the ministry's characters and things like that. It's yourself. Though there was enough magical realism and fiction and biographical elements in The God of Small Things, at the end of it you could still say it was a story. Here, there is nothing. You have just, that's why I said probably the commissioner dialogue was absolutely spot on in saying that you have stripped yourself absolutely threadbare. അതിനൊരു മറയില്ല. There's nothing to hide behind. There's no screen to guard your feelings. So I think it must have been such an emotional roller coaster. In fact, if you ask me, that is probably one reason why I was a little hesitant, because as Malayalis, we expect the author to read a bit of this. And by that time of the book launch here, I had finished half of it. And I was like, I don't want to see this lady in tears, because it's going to change my image of who she is. And in front of an audience, which is her own people, because I remember among the crowd was Pranav Roy and her brother was there. So it must have been such an emotionally charged meeting. And we are all going to be sitting with cameras trying to focus on her face and see if the tears are going to come rolling down. I don't think that makes a good theater experience as such. So leave the book at that. And definitely, I would strongly recommend this book for anyone who's into reading. And don't go by the impression of who she is as the author who's written The Seditious Heart. If you have loved her fictional works, read it for why she is like that. Probably you will tend to accept her more, at least as a person. I'm not talking about the politics behind this at all.
It's like, if we talk about the book, probably there'll be 1 or 2 more hours we can talk about the book. From what I understand, from the way, because there is no repetition at all about what you have talked about the book. So
Because Ashish, I was just thinking, if I've covered all the aspects of it, there are so many aspects of it that she's covered. In fact, if you actually ask for just the non-fictional writing of hers being covered in this book, that itself has some 4 or 5 chapters. And it is not telling you to take sides with her. It is not telling you to take sides with her at all on things that she strongly stood up strong for. It is just telling why she's reached that impression, why she's reached that particular state of mind of what you call as the seditious heart, or why she's written in Azadi. So if you've ever traveled to these areas like the Bastar areas or Kashmir or the Narmada basins, you will understand the feeling of these people there, at least the root people there, not what is out in press and not what is being projected in the media. But if you have actually been a person who's been amongst them, you will understand what she's talking about immediately. You will have an emotional connect. And I'm not saying whether I agree with that or I disagree with that. That's why I said that it helps you to form a judgment of how that person was made by reading a good biography. This is, at the end of it, an excellent biography of probably Mary Roy and Arundhati put together, and to an extent, even G. Isaac. In fact, he's such a beautiful character in this all thing. In fact, I was actually a little upset that I've read so many of these reviews on social media that nobody actually speaks about G. Isaac, but he's actually been monumental in forming the writer in her. And it was not Mary Roy who gave her the quotes. It was not Mary Roy who gave her the best books to read. It was not Mary Roy who gave her the first open support. Another interesting episode that I think we should tell is about the launch of this book, The God of Small Things, was chaired by Madhavikutty Amma at Pallikudam. And this meeting was organized by Mary Roy, more of what you say, let me do it for fear of somebody else doing it and taking the credit. It was set like that. So she said, it's my daughter, so I have the right to project her in Kotte. They did it at the school. And as the meeting was going on, Madhav Kuti gave floral tributes to Arundhati Roy. though Arundhati hardly knew her works and the depth of who wonderful lady was when she was on stage. She later came to realize, and she was very happy to get such floral tributes from Madhakutti Amma. And in walks G. Isaac into the school where he was banned. He was not supposed to enter there. So actually, if he was picked up by Mary Roy, there would have been an immediate police arrest. Imagine the scene, because the backdrop of this school is the Christian inheritance rights activist on stage, the principal of that same school, who stood up against the district collector, watching her brother walk in. But she actually missed him. That she probably never saw G. Isaac walking into the crowd. And Isaac actually sat there and quoted some absolute classics from the background and things like that. But all the while, he went on stage and told Madhavi that he is the Chaco of God of Small Things. So he had a beautiful mind at heart. And though you can actually see that Mary Roy sat with her Christian Dior dark glasses in her car as the family was getting evicted by the SHO. Recently, there was a good article online. I forgot who's posted it. I think it was Radhakrishnan or somebody who said that he was sitting next to Hormis Tharagan, DGP, at the recent book launch. And Hormis Tharagan sir had to actually send a person, the SHO, to actually evict them from the same house because the court verdict from the Supreme Court was in favor of Mary Roy. Okay. But the character that G. Isaac was, he refused to get out. And he had to be literally be thrown out. And she was sitting behind her glasses in the car outside to see this being locked up and his Malabar Coast factory being shut down. But the good thing was, not everything is bad in that book to end. They actually patch up, they share the spoils, and till the end, he was there bedside to Mary Roy. So I'm sure there must have been people taking care of him as doctors or healthcare staff who might have been wondering, isn't this the guy that she fought against? Because it's her own blood. So that is how life is. So there is a beautiful side also to it. And I think G. Isaac was somebody whom I wished I knew more of. And I'm sure if you can taunt Arundhati to write more about this specimen. He's a specimen because he was a Rhodes Scholar. So Rhodes Scholarship, I know Bill Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar. I had a few exemplary juniors of mine at St. John's who were Rhodes Scholars. And it's an absolute genius range personality that you have to have that world's most prized scholarship. So he's a Rhodes Scholar in those days. I think he had a Swedish wife as his first wife. Then he married a local girl uh, as a second wife. And Mary Roy was at the end of it a very casteist lady. She had serious issues with caste and she felt entitled to upper caste feelings also, because there is a part in which she shoots a Dido, Arundhati's pet dog, because it made the criminal uh, um, uh, problem of going out and mating with a stray dog. It was shot. It was shot in his head. So this lady was definitely mad. There was no doubt to it. Let's not dilute the word. But all those eccentricities made her the mother of the rebel.
One last thing, if you could take out a quote from the book. I know there are many, but probably if you could read out, then we can end the talk with that, I think.
I think the best quote has to be the center spread or the back page. In these pages, my mother, my gangster, shall live. She was my shelter and my storm. Nothing sums up the book like these two lines. She was absolute a gangster. In fact, if you ever had to make a movie on a lady gangster, Mary Roy walks in as a lead character. She's probably the Muthal gangster of the story itself. And she lives in the story. In fact, if you ask, Arundhati lives in our midst right now. Mary Roy lives through the book. She was definitely a shelter, because whatever said and done, you can feel Arundhati going back, clawing her way back to that same house for some sort of a protection, some sort of a consolation, some sort of a reinforcement every now and then through the story, though she's not openly accepting that. And definitely my storm. She was an absolute storm. There's no doubt to it. In fact, the profanities which are filtered down also tells us that she was quite a handful and a mouthful, to be very frank. Yeah, and there is no justification for her ill treatment of her children. In fact, there's a part in which LKC Roy says that he finds it difficult for Arundhati to even have such fond memories of Mary Roy. So, so it is a very difficult and very strained motherhood that we are celebrating through this book. So, my honest opinion to people who are yet to take up this book is, if you're non-judgmental about two characters, this suits you to the T. Absolutely no holds barred, you'll enjoy it. But if you're a person who forms judgments and thinks this is white or black, probably you'll come out of it confused. What was she trying to do and things? It's not a typical story as such. It's a life of a person. So that's a quote that I would want to give.
Thank you so much, Doctor. It's wonderful listening to this, and I think it's very, very compelling for anyone to read the book.
One last comment. In fact, I tried to listen to Abraham Verghes's The Covenant of Water. And very honestly, though it's an international production, I would not even name the terrible audio versions that we have discussed recently in house. But unless it's top notch, I would still say read it, because it's a different this thing, because the pace is different, and I don't know how you can stop in between chapters and things like that with audiobooks. I haven't followed that. I know a lot of people who follow audiobooks in Kochi's traffic, which makes a lot of sense to people, at least like Dr. Binoy, who's traveling to Kakinad, tells me that he listens to a lot of audiobooks in the 1.5 hours that he's stuck on roads. Maybe it makes sense. But if you cannot read it at all, yes, audiobook is a this thing. And she's given the voice herself. Okay, so Penguin, I think, probably has made a better job of audiobooks, and you can try that. But it's a keepsake. It's a keepsake book. It's something which you can definitely, have in your own book rack as an author. I'm sure she's got other projects on her mind, because she takes time to write these. 4 years for God of Small Things, 10 years for Ministry of Utmost Happiness. Both of them at the book, this thing one, and the one was shortlisted. And this has taken at least 2 decades, because it's edited so beautifully, not a line out of space. And I hope she comes out with more fiction and non-fiction. I am ready to receive that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deepu. We'll connect once again.
Right.